Welcome everyone to our 30th author interaction being hosted by me and Shreya on our Trends platform. I'm Neeta Aneja and I'm the founder president of Trends International, which is the platform for art, cultural, social, and literary experiences. And with me today is my co-host Shreya, who's a budding architect and spoken word poetess. Today we'll be talking about Irrfan Khan, actor par excellence and very, very honest human being, the man, the dreamer, and the star. And we take immense delight in introducing you to Aseem Chhabra. He's the author of several biographies, including one on Shashi Kapoor and Priyanka Chopra, apart from, of course, the one on the late iconic actor Irrfan Khan, who will forever be missed by all of us and remains popular till now. I present you Aseem ji and will be discussing his wonderful book. But before that, a brief introduction of our illustrious guest today. Mr. Aseem Chhabra is the author of the best-selling and critically acclaimed books Shashi Kapoor, The Householder, The Star, that was in 2016, and then Priyanka Chopra, The Incredible Story of a Global Bollywood Star, that was in 2018. He's a film journalist, a freelance writer, and film festival programmer in New York City. Mr. Chhabra is the festival director of the New York, as I just mentioned, New York Indian Film Festival. He has also programmed and curated various Indian, Asian, and international film festivals in Bengaluru, Pittsburgh, Malta, Macau, and he writes in a lot of international publications. So, sir, welcome to our forum today. And it is indeed such an honor to have you with us.
Thank you.
Just like to directly get into the conversation and just first of all ask you that, could you tell us a little bit about the book and what made you write and, first get inspired to write about Irrfan Khan?
So I like everybody who's listening in today, I mean, we've all been fans of Irrfan's work, very honest and very deep portrayals that he did in films like Pan Singh Tomar and Namesake and Lunchbox and Maqbool, and those performances have stayed with us. And that's why when he died in last year, April 29th, I think it really affected us personally because his performances, we really connected with the characters he created. I mean, all of us did. So, I've been a fan of his for a long time. In early 2018, I had finished my book on Priyanka Chopra and it was still being edited. It was released in July of 2018 to coincide with her birthday. And about that time, I was, again, my publishers suggested a few names. And when they suggested Irrfan Khan, I actually jumped at it. I mean, I thought I would love to work on the book. It took a couple of, it takes about a month or two to go through the process of contracts and everything else. And then suddenly, I think it was in March of 2018 that Irrfan announced that he had cancer, sort of a tumor that we hadn't even heard of before, and that he was going to go outside the country for treatment and that he would keep in touch. So it came with a big shock, but I had already started mentally the process of working on the book. And I thought, I never got a chance to interview him, by the way. I'd interviewed him before and I spoke to him while he was getting treatment in London also. But I thought that, the time was right to celebrate Irrfan as an actor and also look at his life, where he started from, his journey from Jaipur in a sort of a lower middle class family, I would say. And then coming to National School of Drama because he actually wanted to come into films, but he didn't know how else to come into films. And the Pune Film and Television Institute had discontinued the acting courses. So the only choice for him was to go to National School of Drama, where, by the way, Irrfan lied because when he went for his interview, one of the things they ask is, hopefully you're committed to, being part of acting in plays. And he said, yes, that's what he wanted to do, although he only wanted to be in films. So I track that. And then I look at his life and his career simultaneously. It's a parallel story about the man and what his dreams were and how he became a star in India first and then outside India. So that's essentially what the book is about. And there was a sort of a hard close to the book, basically, because when he was doing, in 2019, he was shooting Angrezi Medium. We thought he would get okay. So I was writing the book at that time. Didn't realize that would be his last film. So.
Right. All of us individually took it as a personal loss when he passed away. And the book, in fact, came a few months before his passing away.
Yes.
You were so close to writing his book and you knew him inside out because you were writing his biography. So what were your feelings when you first heard his going away?
Oh, God. Look, I mean, okay, I met Irrfan, and I write in the book the number of times I met him. Probably I track it also. And I opened my first opening paragraph is when I was in New York City, and I was actually going to work at early in the morning around 8:30, and suddenly my cell phone rang, and it was a call from it. It was an India number +91. I didn't know who was calling me. And then he said he was Irrfan Khan, and he wanted to know about, I'd seen Namesake. He hadn't even seen it, and I had written about it. And I met him a few times after that in Mumbai. I interviewed him in New York on a later occasion. And, it was one of those Mumbai Film Festival party events. You walk up, you say, hi, how are you doing, kind of a thing. I never got to know him very well personally. But what happens is when you spend almost 2 years of your life, and this was exactly 2 years because he died in April and I started writing the book sometime in March, April of 2018, 2 years before that. And quite a few of most of Irrfan's films I had seen, but I watched them again this time to focus on him as a character. I also saw some films of his that I had not seen. I saw a lot of his television shows, which I had not seen because I lived in the US through the 1990s and earlier also. So I missed all the television shows. So I watched whatever was available on YouTube and whatever I could dig up. You end up reading a lot. You end up talking to, I interviewed, 50, 60 people filmmakers, directors, actors who worked with him. So basically, you're living with a person for 2 years, and the book came out, and then people were appreciating the book, and then suddenly he was gone. Now, I had a sense he was not doing too well. February 2020, I was at the Bangalore Lit Fest, and somebody mentioned to me the release condition was not good because he had also stopped responding to my WhatsApp messages. And then we knew, the day he went to the hospital, he died one day later. So one of the journalist editors I know, she said to me, she said, listen, he's gone to the hospital and it reports that it doesn't look too good. Can you write an obituary? And so we'll bring it out immediately when he dies, if he dies. I just couldn't get to do it. And especially when it was just one day, he'd just gone to the hospital and I had a sense it's going to be really, I just couldn't be this aggressive journalist who wanted his article to be there first before anybody else. Which as a journalist was not a good decision, by the way, because what happened was that he died suddenly around like noon, and suddenly I had 3 requests to write articles from BBC and from Mint and from another one. And one by one, I had to, in 2 hours time, I was produced one piece, another 3 hours time, I produced one piece. And what happens is, it happened when Shashi Kapoor also died. I was in Macau when Shashi Kapoor died, and there was a whole time difference. And likewise with Irrfan's death, suddenly, because I was the only person who had written a biography of Shashi Kapoor and the only person who had written a biography of Irrfan, what happens is journalists around the world dig up. And I'm getting direct messages on Twitter from CNN and BBC, and everybody wants to interview you. So you get this adrenaline rush kind of a thing. And, while I'm writing my articles, I'm also giving interviews, etc. And then what happens is that there is a slow period late at night or the next day when it's suddenly is a little quieter. And, I needed space to mourn also. As a fan, I needed to mourn. But also for a man that I really respected and really, really liked him a lot, as a person, as an actor. I shed a few tears. It was quite devastating. And then for many days, many of my friends, journalist friends also, we kept discussing why is it that seems so personal to us? Why are we so devastated? Rishi Kapoor died the next day, who, by the way, I knew personally. I've hung out with Rishi Kapoor. He'd come to our festival in New York. I've been to bars with him. I've been to his house also. So Rishi Kapoor I knew better than, Irrfan knew me, but Rishi Kapoor I knew much more personally. His death also affected me. But it was Irfan's death that really, and again, Rishi Kapoor is somebody I'd known since I was a kid. Basically, he was older than me, but I'd seen Mera Naam Joker when I was a young teen or something. But Irfan's death really became a personal thing for all of us, really, and it was very hard. It was very hard. It still is when you think about it.
I think all of us who've seen most of his movies, right from Namesake to Pan Singh Tomar to Maqbool. I mean, it's been a personal loss all over India, and still is. You can't. I know he was suffering through cancer, but still, whenever you think about him, you think with a smile, and you really the kind of respect that he still enjoys in the audience today is remarkable. And I can understand your personal dilemma. Your book, Irfan Khan, which is The Man, the Dreamer, and the Star, is very, very well researched. It is definitely a sincere tribute to the magnificent actor that was Irfan Khan. But as you said somewhere in the book, and I read that he was, and I think everyone here right now will agree that he was, and I will quote you, that he was एक ऐसा कलाकार जिसकी आंखें अफसाने कहती थी और अभी भी ऐसा लगता है कहती हैं. He was definitely a shy guy, and as you've mentioned somewhere, that maybe that was the reason why he was in the movies, to deal with that. So please tell us what really struck you the first time you had met him. What was that, for us it is his eyes, for us is his persona, the way he was. What was it about him that struck you so much the first time?
By the way, I can't take credit for that line, "Aisa kalakar jinki aankhein afsana kehti hain." Vinay Pathak said that. Vinay Pathak used to do a show, I forget on which television. I think Asian Paints had this show called Ghar Ghar Ki Kahani or something like that, where every week he would talk to one star about their life and their childhood in the homes. So usme Vinay Pathak had said that, and I put that in the footnotes also. The first time I met Irfan Khan was he had come to New York to promote a film called A Mighty Heart, which I think everyone should watch. I think it's available on Amazon Prime, if I'm not mistaken. Very, very powerful film, story of the American Wall Street Journal journalist, South Asia correspondent Danny Pearl, who was he happened to be in Pakistan. He was based in Delhi, but he was covering Pakistan in Delhi. And after 9/11, he was looking to investigate the shoe bomber, Richard, whatever his name was, the journey of the money and everything else. And he was kidnapped, and then he was killed. And Irfan plays the role of a police officer, basically, who's referred to as the captain, who's a real, and it's all the characters in the film are real. So he'd come to New York to promote the film, and we did it. There was a round table. He acknowledged me. He remembers me because he had called me before that for the namesake when I had seen Namesake, and he hadn't. So it was a round table. There were like 2 or 3 other journalists and me, and I was the only Indian. And at one point, after the Q&A was over, he took me aside and he said, "Acha, bataiye kuch yahan ho raha hai," which I kind of figured out because his career had just started in the West. He had Namesake already, of course, was there, and then he had also acted in Wes Anderson's Darjeeling Limited. What struck me immediately was that, he was very personable. He was very friendly. He wanted to know my opinion about, do people know him basically as an actor outside India. But what struck me was that here was a guy who really, he wanted to make it big in the West, but he was always, and this is what I learned later also when I talked to a lot of people, he was always hungry for something new. He was hungry for new projects. He was hungry for challenges as an actor. He wanted to be really pushed. And he felt that the challenges sometimes that he was not getting in India, he could get those in projects that were, outside India. And I thought that was really very interesting. And, he was, a lot of actors would, and I'm not, people like Salman Khan, etc., who I don't know at all personally, will never show their vulnerable side, will never sort of reflect their insecurities as such. And then, Salman's had up and down in his career also. Shah Rukh has had ups and downs. Shah Rukh actually is a lot more honest about his career. But most big stars don't acknowledge that. But the fact that Irrfan was asking me this question was because he wanted to know, does he have a chance? Does he have a chance beyond what he's already done in India? And he was obviously sort of unclear about that. And he reflected a certain kind of insecurity, a very down to earth, like all of us human beings are. I mean, he showed this very human side of himself to me, which I thought was really wonderful. Really, I was very touched by it, very moved. And he trusted me. I mean, hardly knew me that well, but he trusted my opinion.
I think this vulnerability that you talk about, that sort of translated on screen as well. That it came out through all his characters, and it was not about that we were seeing somebody who was larger than life. It was just a common person doing extraordinary things for us. So I think that was also one of the reasons why everyone took his passing away so personally. So, sir, getting on to the part of writing the book, I want to ask you, what kind of honesty do you have to maintain as a biographer when you're writing a biography on celebrities? Since most of these subjects do not officially sign off or authorize their books. So what kind of, is it totally 100% honesty, and how much do you want to dig in when you first start writing these biographies?
Well, fortunately for Irrfan's life and career, there was no gossip about Irrfan. When I wrote a book about Priyanka Chopra, we all know there's a lot of gossip about Priyanka Chopra. There still is. There was nothing like that about Irrfan. So it wasn't something I was concerned about. But look, first of all, if I take up a subject, if I'm going to write about somebody, and I think I said that earlier also, when you spend this long period of time, you have to care for the person. You have to respect the person. Because I can't be writing about, there are actors, I don't have to name them. There are actors and actresses who I personally cannot stand them for various reasons. And I would not want to spend even 5 minutes just researching about them. In Irrfan's case, there was a lot of the thrill and joy of watching the films, which I had seen again. I've seen Lunchbox like 5-6 times, but watching it again, watching Namesake again, I really wanted to capture and understand Irrfan as an actor for the first time, as if I was looking at it for the first time, and put it down in the papers. And I wanted to stay as respectful as possible. Obviously, he was not paying me to write a book about him. It was unauthorized as such, although he did give me one of the times I talked to him when he was in London, he gave me some pointers in terms of people I should talk to and articles I should read. I was very objective. There are few points where I talk about his struggle with his English language, especially in Hollywood films. I quote Naseeruddin Shah, who gave me a wonderful interview, that Naseeruddin Shah was not at all impressed with Irrfan's performance in Life of Pi, because Naseer says that usko Angrezi itni achhi tarah se nahi janta. So the role that Irrfan had to play in Life of Pi, which is the adult Pi character who's living in Montreal, and he was not only supposed to speak English, but he was supposed to speak English with a Quebecian French Montreal accent. And Naseer had a point that Irrfan's English was so accented in any case, it had the Jaipur accent or whatever, for him to be able to translate that, but he was not able to do it. And you could see he was struggling. And so there are times especially when I saw Irrfan in some of the Hollywood films, and I felt his English was very jarring, and I sometimes felt that it might be a tad bit impacting his performance as such, hampering the character he was playing. Irrfan did some bad films. I mentioned some of those. But I wanted to, as I said, I wanted to celebrate the man. I want people 5 years from now, I don't know, books stay for a while. If somebody, young kids, teenagers, when they're in their 20s, 30s, discover Irrfan through his films, if they can go back and watch some of his films and maybe read sections of my book or read my book or buy my book, I think that'll be very, very satisfying. I mean, I'm not, as writers, we end up spending a lot of time researching and writing and the books. We make very little money. And so I'm doing it for the love of writing, but I'm doing it for the love of Irrfan. And so I had to be respectful and honest to him.
So something that I was personally curious about was, so we know Irrfan Khan as an audience. You knew him before writing the book personally as well, as you mentioned. But was there anything completely different that we don't know about, that you didn't know about before you started to write? So after you discovered and after you researched, is there something that you discovered about him that you would like to share with us?
Yeah, so there were things which I discovered only by talking to people. And then I, of course, read some interviews with him also. When you see him in a film, when you see in Maqbool, he has that, the swagger, the way he walks. Although there are insecurities and jealousies in Maqbool when he realized, because Tabu's having, she's married to the Pankaj Kapoor character, or in different roles. I mean, in Namesake, for instance, we see him struggling to connect with his son. Who just doesn't, there's a generation gap, and the son doesn't want to deal with his father and father's issues. But so that's all acting. What I did not know was that Irrfan was a very insecure man. And I think that insecurity then leads to some of the best performances, because he would only feel comfortable in the presence of a camera and would be able to give his best, because that's when you are, there are actors who become super overconfident, and then their overconfidence shows in the performances, and it becomes a very false performance. In Irrfan's case, the reason his performances seemed so real and believable, that we all think that we know a character like Rana in Piku, for instance, is because he was coming from a space where he was insecure. He came from a small town in Jaipur. Jaipur is not a small town, but like relatively small. He comes to National School of Drama, where he met people, including his future wife Shutapa and Meeta Vashist, who had come from Chandigarh, Tigmanshu Dhulia, who had come from Allahabad. They were much better educated. They had read books. They had watched Hollywood films. They knew all of Al Pacino's works and Marlon Brando's work. Irrfan didn't have that kind of exposure, and he wanted to learn all of that. And I think all through his life, he had this hunger to he was always striving to improve himself, to be better. I believe he was always, every time he was on a set, he would carry a book with him. He was always reading something, because he wanted to learn more and more, because I think he had missed out during his college days and school days, that culture he had not been introduced to. And I thought that was a very interesting thing to learn about him. I didn't know that at all. So I mean, there were many other issues, but that to me, and it shows the man's character and personality, actually.
Totally, I understand, because the very fact that he always wanted to improve himself. Movie to movie, he's forever improving. So something is going in his mind, and you're talking about insecurities. You're so right. It is also true to the fact that you're fighting a battle with yourself, that you have to improve in each movie. Get into the character. He used to get in all the characters so deeply, and he was living the characters. As I read about him, I come to know. Concerning Irrfan, what is your biggest regret today? Because I think you could not even come to know how he liked the book, because unfortunately he passed away, because the book came out a few months before he moved on.
I haven't had I've been in touch with Irrfan's wife, Shwetapa, quite a few times after he passed away. WhatsApp, she always responds to me. We are Facebook friends, and we've discussed things. I even told her that in January of 2020, I was in Kolkata, and that was my first trip. I went to Kolkata, and through a friend, I was connected to, I went to see Soumitra Chatterjee. I was really honored to meet Soumitra Chatterjee, and he also, poor man, died last year. And I gave him a copy of my book, the Irrfan book, and he was very appreciative. And he said to me later when I was leaving, he said, "Tell Irrfan that I'm a fan of his." So I after Soumitra Chatterjee died, I sent that message to Shutapa. But I haven't had the courage to ask Shrutapa. By the way, did Irrfan actually had a chance to look at my book, or what did he think about my book? Because that, I'm here talking about my book, okay? And and as an author, at the end of the day, you want your book to be sold, you want people to buy copies, you get royalties, you make a living or something like that. But I just can't make this about myself. It's about Irrfan. And to just think about like, oh, did he read my book? Or did he look at my book? I have no idea. There's no way I'm going to ever ask Shrutapa this question, even when I meet her. Because that's very selfish of me. She lost her husband. We have all lost a very, very fine actor who's a sort of a national treasure of India, really. So yeah, I'm glad I had a chance to spend time and write a book about him. I'm glad I did, and I think I did a fairly good justice to it. At least that's what, people who read the book, they're very appreciative of it. So.
Yes, and this is the book that we're talking about.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful book. I have read it and I recommend everyone to read it. If you want to get to know Irrfan even more, like Aseem has done, I would say. I think it's a wonderful book to read.
Just before we move on to the interactive round, there are a few people who want to ask you questions personally. Sure. So just before that, so would you like to tell us a little bit more about why people should go and read the book, and probably about your future projects? Are you writing another biography as of now?
Okay, I'll answer the second question right now. I have not worked on anything. It's been a year plus since my book came out, and my publishers, they stopped hounding me. They were, it's not an easy job to write a book, especially when you're writing on Star. Then you have to, more than anything else, you have to chase, directors and people who I know personally. There are many, many people I interviewed for this book who I know very well. But to chase them for interviews and it's an exhausting. And then he died, and then I spent the entire year during the lockdown to talk about this book. Done Zoom conversations like this. I've done literary festivals, and the book is still alive 1 year after it came out. I mean, I'm so honored and touched. So many people are listening to this conversation. So no, I'm not working on anything right now. I hopefully will sometime soon. Why people should read about the book? I mean, if you like Irrfan as an actor, what I've done is I've taken his key films. So I've taken films, Makpoor, Pan Singh Tomar, I mentioned Lunchbox, D-Day, which I think his performance is very, very good in D-Day. His Hollywood films, many of his Hollywood films, including Life of Pi. And I've talked to directors and asked them specifically about, explain to me, how would Irrfan perform? How would Irrfan play that role? How would he transform himself in the presence of a camera? Because I wanted to understand again and again Irrfan the actor, and of course how he became a star. And I think a lot of people have actually told me they found that those parts of the, when you watch something like Namesake or Pan Singh Tomar, then to listen to the director or Meghna Gulzar, who directed him in Talwar, and to hear about some key scenes in Talwar, for instance. What did she talk to him? How did he work with the actors? I've talked to some actors who he worked with, Konkana Sen and Tilotoma Shom and everybody else that he's worked in different films. I think that there was a lot I learned while writing those sections. I think it was, to me, very interesting, very fascinating. Because we can all go see films and say, okay, it's great, and he was so much fun in Piku. But the fact is that when I spoke to Shujit Sarkar and understood from him how between Irrfan and Deepika and Amitabh Bachchan, how they played the key roles, I think that makes the process of watching the film much more interesting. I think we get some background information and especially about the actors and their process. I've tried to do that again and again through the book, while also tracking his personal life and his his career and how he sort of goes up. I mean, there was a time when he was so he made a 1 hour film, which I mentioned. It's available on Amazon Prime. It's called Road to Ladakh. Ashwin Kumar is his filmmaker, documentary filmmaker who directed Road to Ladakh. And Irrfan was very young at that time. And then after Road to Ladakh was made, Irrfan went to London and stayed at Ashwin's home. They shared, and then Ashwin Kumar took the film to Cannes Film Festival in the market section. Anybody can take a film in the market section and talk around. And Ashwin rented a room, and Irrfan and Ashwin shared a bed because they just obviously were not very well off. And Irrfan said to Ashwin that, one day I'll come back to this festival and walk the red carpet. And a few years later, he did come back with the film that I mentioned, A Mighty Heart, walked the red carpet. And a couple of years later, he again came back and walked the red carpet with Lunchbox. So you can see the journey of this man from where he comes from Jaipur to National School of Drama, where he tried very hard to become an actor and hone his skills. And then his 10 years he spent working in television, where it was mostly a struggle because television, while it gave him, he made a decent amount of money. It's not like he become rich acting in television, but he was able to survive living in Bombay. But at all times, it was an artistic struggle. He wanted something more until he got some very big breaks, including a film called The Warrior, which everyone should try and find out and find and see. And I've done that, to see that path of a man, and then from how his dreams translated into, that's why I call it a dreamer, dreams translated into an actor. So yeah, a lot of that is in the book.
Sorry. So I was just saying, I think that's amazing. And I feel that everyone should definitely go and read the book, because last year has been heavy for all of us, for the Bollywood industry, specifically losing so many stars. And, reading about these kind of stars, people who had so much of gravitas in their acting, in their personal lives as well, is very inspirational, because this has been the time for artists. This has been the time where people are getting back to their artistic sides, and to read about this kind of grit, to read about this kind of hunger is just amazing. So I think that would be a great idea to buy the book and get to reading this.
So Shreya, we can move on to the interactive round.
Yes.
First, we have Preeta Thakur. In fact, she's a respected game changer in the theatre world. She's got 30 years of experience in the Hindi theatre world. Her work with Dinesh Thakur and Ank Theatre, one of the oldest and most prolific theatre groups in the country, is crucial in context of any discussion of theatre in the city. So welcome, Preeta.
Hello, Aseem ji.
Hi, Kale, how are you? Yeah.
Aseem ji, I met you long ago at Prithvi Theatre with Shashi ji, when you were, I think, researching his book at that time with Mark and Dinesh Thakur. There was a bit of a get-together or something where we met. So
probably,
I remember, but Prithvi Theatre and the whole, at that time you were writing about. I just wanted to know whether, you got a chance ever to discuss with Irrfan about his creative process, or you got the information from the other directors and co-actors?
Yes, so it was mostly through my own observations and through other directors and co-actors, because I interviewed Irrfan a couple of times before that for specific films, but it was never on a much serious level kind of a thing. And when I talked to him, I think June of 2018, he was in London getting treatment, and we had like a 15-minute conversation where he wanted to know more about what the book was about. And we, I said, I would like to interview you also. And he said, I'm not in the right place right now. And I didn't want to push him. The poor man was getting cancer treatment at that time. So I never got a chance to, but there are things that you hear from people. I mean, something Vishal Bhardwaj has talked about, how, there's a scene in Haider, for instance, where so Irrfan plays the ghost, Ruh, and Haider's father and Irrfan's character Rudar, they are in the same jail. And so it was in this room in this, it was in Kashmir where the shoot was happening. And Vishal Bhardwaj was busy, talking to a lot of people, and, the cameras are being set and everything else. And they suddenly realized, and the actors are getting ready with makeup, and suddenly they realized that Irrfan had gone and sat in a corner or one part of the room. And he was completely like, his head was in the hand, and he was getting into the character. And Vishal suddenly realized that this is where Irrfan wants to be seated, or this is where he wants to stand. So he got the cameraman and the lighting people, etc., and even the other actors to say, that's how we're going to do it. Irrfan had already decided where he felt very comfortable, where his character would be. He was, I mean, obviously, Irrfan needed direction also from Vishal Bhardwaj, what his character was supposed to do in that particular scene and overall. But what I found fascinating was that here was this man who almost took charge. He knew cinema well enough, but he also had confidence that, the director and the other crew and the other actors will surround themselves, set themselves where he was going to go sit. And I thought that was really interesting. There's a film of Irrfan, by the way, that all of us, very few people have watched. It's called Puzzle. It's one of his last few Hollywood films. It's one of his rare American indie films, because he usually did very big budget to Hollywood films. Puzzle is actually available on YouTube. I think you can watch it for like 200 rupees or something like that. It's very reasonably priced. And I talked to the director of Puzzle, and he told me something really interesting. There's a sequence where Irrfan's character, Kelly MacDonald, who plays this married woman, they solve jigsaw puzzles, and that becomes a metaphor for life and everything else. They're in a kitchen, and this whole conversation is going on. And I think, now I may be saying it opposite, because I mean, it's there in the book. Either the director wanted them to sit, and Irrfan said, no, actually, you know what? I think it'll be better. I'll be better if I stand and say this thing, my dialogue. And Kelly also agreed. And the director said, okay, try it out. And the director suddenly realized that the scene was working much better with the way Irrfan had decided. So, there was a director also in Irrfan that none of us know, where he, it was the director insisted, no, you have to sit down and do it. He would have done it. But he's, in this open conversation, he said, look, I'm feeling better if I can move around the dining table, in the kitchen table kind of a thing. I think the dialogues and my character, the way he's going to sort of behave, will be much more effective. And, so I think it's interesting. I don't think that's something that Irrfan would have thought. I mean, he turned up in the kitchen where the shoot was going to go on, and suddenly felt that's the way the process is going to work for him. So I think he used to, just before the shoot, often give a lot of thought to, actors rehearse, actors learn lines, actors rehearse among themselves, they feed lines to each other. But then how they are going to move around in the presence of camera, and how they become the characters for the brief moment, whether it's a 2-minute shot or a 3-minute shot. I think Irrfan he had worked in many films before that, and felt this degree of confidence, and was honest enough to say, I think my character will do much better if he's standing. I found that really interesting.
And I think this is more a part of theater training than anything else.
Exactly, probably, yes.
For the set, for the situation, for the surrounding, as a major part of theater training.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Preeta. Now we have Naina Sagar. She was originally an advertising professional, but now she's a very famous theater director and an actress from capital Delhi. And she's also acted in Bollywood movies. Naina?
Good evening, Aseem. It was a very enlightening talk. Hi. I remember some time back, maybe 3 or 4 years back, I had the good fortune of meeting Nawazuddin Siddiqui when he was giving a talk somewhere and talking about his process for the Mountain Man.
Okay.
And he said he went to that village in Bihar, and he was a Musahar in that. They have rats. They eat rats. So he was majorly into method, and he said this is how I was preparing for that role, Dashrath Manji's role. And during the talk, very interesting talk, he told me. I asked him, so how much do you derive? Your method derives from theater, and how much do you derive from there and give it to films? So he says, he told me, देखिए जनाब, theater मेरी बीवी है और films मेरी महबूबा है. This is what he said. So that got me thinking. That was very interesting what he said. So even with the Irrfan coming from the NSD background, with that solid hard-ruled training of NSD, and that when I watch his movies also throughout, from Salam Bombay onwards to whatever, I always was never really, except maybe Rudar in Haidar and Maqbool. Maqbool totally floored me, what he did in Maqbool. So is there, I'm going to read this book definitely. I want to know from you. In Maqbool, I definitely saw him, I saw a very heightened sensitivity towards his character. Of course, he was sparring with Tabu, no less, as Lady Macbeth, and that's quite a formidable opponent, or not opponent, a co-actor there. So maybe she contributed a lot to that also. As would, I mean, depending on the co-actor, also you raise your game to a large extent. So I wanted to know from you, did he by any chance mention anything about any particular preparation for Maqbool, or, because there I thought that he was actually jumping out of the screen. The character had grown so much, like the screen couldn't contain him. Yeah. That is what I felt there.
So, as I said, I never got a chance to interview Irrfan, so that becomes kind of a tough thing to answer really. But I spoke to Nasiruddin Shah about working with Irrfan. There's a sequence in Maqbool where towards the middle or latter part of the film, Piyush Mishra's character, which is supposed to be Banco in Hamlet, he has been killed. And of course, Macbeth is responsible for his death. Yeah. And in this case, Piyush Mishra's body is brought into this courtyard where Abaji, his house, Pankaj Kapoor's house. And Irrfan is standing there because and the guilt that Irrfan's character has in him, he suddenly is looking at the body and he suddenly sees Piyush Mishra's character's eyes open. And Irrfan got so startled that and this was not Vishal Bhardwaj's direction, Irrfan's character got so startled that he stepped back. Now Nasir was standing right next to him. And so one shot, Nasir just sort of held him and stopped him. And Irrfan said to him, Nasir bhai, aap kya kar rahe ho? So Irrfan said, Nasir said, tum gir jate, main tumhe pakad raha hu, tum gir jate. So Irrfan said, nahi, main gir nahi raha tha, main acting kar raha tha, mujhe malum hai main kya kar raha tha. And I thought that was really interesting. Achha. But in terms of preparation, different films require different preparation. When Irrfan did the Namesake, he was supposed to speak in English with a very heavy Bengali accent. So what Meera and I did was, Meera and I connected Irrfan with Jhumpa Lahiri's father, who had also migrated to America, US, like Irrfan, like in his 20s or 30s, something like that, and had an accent. And Irrfan spent some time with, there's a Bengali small restaurant owner, restaurateur, Shankar, his name is, in New York. So Irrfan spent some time with him also learning to speak in the Bengali accent. And apparently Irrfan's Bengali accent had become so pronounced that at one point Meera had to tell him, can you tone it down? Because she didn't want the film to have subtitles. So it's really interesting. I mean, every project is different. I just want to quickly mention, there's a show that Irrfan did for HBO, which again, very few people in India know about it. It's called In Treatment. In Treatment, by the way, is available. All the episodes in Treatment are available on Disney Hotstar. And I think it was the first or second season. It's inspired by an Israeli, it's actually based on an Israeli show, half-an-hour episodes, where you have a therapist sitting with his patients. And Irrfan plays the role of, again, a Bengali Indian man who's a widower and has come to live with his son and his American daughter-in-law. And he's going through this tragedy, the sadness, mourning of his loss of wife. Of his wife, and also dealing with his son and the daughter-in-law and how they're raising the child and everything else. So what that show required was that the half-an-hour show, they would have 14 minutes continuous shots without any cuts. And then they would have 14 minutes continuous shot also. Irrfan, after he left National Drama, did a few plays, but then he stopped doing theater altogether. And the role was so demanding, and the deep tragedy that he had to bring inside, that was driving Irrfan into sort of a depression kind of a thing, because his character was supposed to be depressed also, and he started drinking a lot. The other part was that the night before one of the shoots, Irrfan had to learn many pages of dialogues, and he was freaking out. And he picked up the phone and he called Nasiruddin Shah. Nasiruddin Shah has continuously done theater while he's also been doing films.
Yeah, totally.
So Irfan
Motley
actually
Crue.
called Nasiruddin Shah and said, Nasir bhai, how do you remember your dialogues? How do you memorize your dialogues? And Nasir said, you have to read them 1,000 times. You've got to read them again and again and again. That's the only way you memorize the dialogues. And Irfan said, I have to remember a 14-minute dialogue. How do I do it? And Nasir said, when is your shoot? And Irfan said, tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. So then Nasir said, bhai, dekho, tumhari ye raat to gayi. You have to be up the whole night and you have to memorize. There is no easy solution. You have to memorize, you have to read and read and read and read. So Irfan's preparation from role to role was different. So it's called In Treatment on Disney Hotstar. It's a part of the HBO thing, and please look out for it. There were 6 episodes, and Irfan has often talked about that was the hardest role he ever played. It was emotionally very hard for him. Yeah, very few people in India have seen it.
Okay, definitely. Thank you so much. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Neena. Now we have Dr. Amrinder Bajaj. She is in fact an eminent author of various books, including For the Love of Man and Afternoon Girl. That was her Pushwant memoirs. She's an awarded, renowned practicing gynecologist. And we were privileged to have Dr. Bajaj as our 5th author in our renowned author interaction series. Dr. Welcome.
Hi, thank you very much. Hello.
Hello, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Really enjoying this. Yeah.
Yeah, same here. I was there once where you were sitting. And I know I totally agree with you about writing being a passion that doesn't pay. Otherwise, I would have stopped even being a doctor and written only continuously.
Yeah.
Now I'm writing a book on female sexuality for Bloomsbury.
Wow.
And yeah, I've written for Penguin also.
Yeah.
That book has yet to come out and all that. So about Irfan, I was asking that that's one small, very authentic role he did in Life in a Metro.
Yep.
I know a person like that.
Yep.
So I just couldn't stop laughing that this is, and really sometimes the more educated women do get attracted to people like that towards the end of the.
He was hilarious in that film.
Yeah, that was really funny. That was very good. Which role did he like best of all? Of his own, the many roles he played.
My sense is, I think, let me see if Irfan has talked about which roles he's liked. I mean, I keep bringing up Namesake again and again. Lunchbox was a role that I think he liked a lot. Lunchbox was a very, very tough role for him to play because while, when it comes to the way the film is made and the edits and everything else, so there is him writing these letters and then his voice is being, the letters are being read by Nimrat Kaur and then back and forth. He never meets Nimrat Kaur's character. There's one scene and he's sitting in a restaurant. He sees her there, but he never meets her. So there is never a face-to-face conversation between them. And of course, he's working in this office, and Nawaz's character is there. But to play a very lonely, sad man, and then who starts to fall in love with a woman who he has never met, who he doesn't know what she looks like. That role to play, and there are many scenes where Irfan is standing. I'm sure. I hope you've seen. I'm sure you've seen Lunchbox.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah, there are many scenes where he's standing alone in his balcony and smoking at night, or he's like, there are scenes of him being in a train or something like that, in a bus, and just the camera just focused on his eyes. That's a very tough role to play, and he did a very, very good job. In fact, I think Nimrat also did a very good job because Nimrat also, many of the scenes, she was alone. She was cooking and she would talk to this auntie who lived upstairs, but it was the voice that we hear.
Yeah, that's true.
So when actors have to act alone and yet they bring this absolute authenticity and honest, tragedy, and then he falls in love. That's really remarkable. And those films also gave Irfan a certain kind of a credibility beyond just many of the other films he had done. I mean, he got a lot of international recognition from those kind of films. That's why he got a role in Slumdog Millionaire, for instance, later. So, yeah.
And how was writing for Priyanka Chopra? Is she just, I don't know, that iconic or that classy, or is she just a normal middle class girl?
Well, all of the above. Priyanka Chopra's book also, I was not able to talk to her. I had interviewed her before, so I was able to use some of those, all of my interviews because that was my material. I was in negotiation with Priyanka's team to talk to her when she went and signed a contract for her book, which just came out in the last few weeks, unfinished.
Yeah, yeah.
This is in 2017 when I started working on the book, and I was told that she's going to be writing her book, and I was worried that her book will come out before mine. Nobody would buy my book also. And her book never came out. It never came out. And I was like, when is this? I moved on. I wrote the book on Irrfan. I've done other things, etc. I learned a lot when I wrote the book on Priyanka Chopra, because I think I learned to respect Priyanka a lot more while I was writing the book. I wasn't that crazy about Priyanka as an actress initially, and even now I would say, I mean, I don't know, she'll agree also. Some of her early films, Andaz and some of the other Etras, etc., those are really, her performance is really bad.
I liked her in Barfi.
Well,
when she was actress.
Barfi was much later, by which time she had become a very seasoned actress. I mean, she'd already won a national award for fashion before that. And
yeah, that was good also. Huh?
Some of her last films, when she did Dil Dhadakne Do, when she did Bajira Mastani, it's Bajira Mastani, the way Priyanka uses her face to show the pain and the hurt of a woman.
And the hand also like this. She does like that.
And the husband goes and brings another wife, basically. It is fantastic. But I learned a lot about how Priyanka was so hardworking, how at the age of 17, a young girl from Bareilly becomes a Miss India and then ends up becoming a Miss World. How then she goes into, films with no godfathers really, on her own. I mean, her mother stayed with her for the longest time, would go for all the shoots. She became a star on his own accord, and then, which very few people have been able to do, even Irrfan never became that, because Priyanka has become a very big star in America. And to start, and then she took the risk to become a singer, which her singing career went nowhere, to then become what she is now, a very well-known star in America and Hollywood. I mean, she's done a lot of work. She hasn't done anything exceptional. No Oscar-worthy performances, but most Americans know who Priyanka Chopra is. And, she's been on television, she's had PR machine helping her out, but also she had that the spirit to work hard, and it's very, very impressive what Priyanka has been able to achieve.
Speaking of godfathers, is there any way of making a book into a movie or a web series without a godfather? I would love to have one of my books made one.
Without a god, I mean, I don't know if you need godfathers, but you need to be able to know the strategy. And I don't know the first thing about making, web series, something like that, because you have to.
You don't need to make your books into the web series.
But the thing is, you have to pitch. You have to learn how to pitch. You have to know the right people to reach, whether it's
whom to reach that,
whatever, and how you reach them. You have to have a good producer with you. That's very important, because the producer is the one who's going to stand with you when that process is going on, and. You got to have some, you can do it yourself, or some good script writers who will then translate your book into a very strong script. Those are very important tasks. But most important, get a good producer, get somebody who believes in you and your project, and then then you guys as a team go and meet.
I'm in Delhi. I'm a doctor, and I just barely get time to write, leave alone I would do this thing.
That's what life is all about. But
nice interacting with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Now we have Dupamudra Gogai. In fact, she is the author of A Little More Life. In fact, she was our 24th author interaction guest.
Oh, wow.
And she met you recently in the International Kerala Festival. Her husband has been making a lot of waves with his movie on the balcony.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Oh, that's you, your husband. And I met your son also.
Yes.
Oh my God! Now I know who I'm talking to. Yeah. We had lunches a few times and dinners. Of course, now I don't remember you. Of course. Hi.
Yeah, hi, sir. So good to see you all over again. Sir.
Yeah. Good to see you also.
It was a wonderful session, actually, basically, and as such, Irrfan Khan sir is also one of my favorite actors. So it was really a great, listening about him and about your journey of writing this book. And congratulations.
Thank you.
Definitely, I'd love to read this book.
Yeah.
So my question is to you is that, since as Neeta ma'am has said that, you are, besides being a writer, you are also a film festival programmer and a festival director. So I would just like to know, what are the criteria, what are the criteria that you pick up a film? Is it always the content, or is it always that you also look at the technical aspects? I just would like to know about it.
Well, first of all, I have the link of your husband's film in my email box, and I have to watch it next week. So I'm really looking forward to. I missed it in Trivandrum. When we select films, I mean, I do it, and I have a team of 5 other programmers. One's in India, the rest of them are in New York. You know, there are many criteria. Every film has a different criteria. I mean, what I like to tell people is, you know, I want to be surprised when I see a film. There are, you know, our submission process is on right now. We already have like over 150 films, documentary narratives, shorts, features submitted. We can't program them all. And some of them, I've got to admit, are not good at all. So I know they will not be good. Some I've already seen are not good at all. But I want to see something which is so unique and different that I'm so excited and I'm so surprised that I can then take it to my audience in New York and share it with them. I think the greatest joy that I get as a film festival programmer, and I program many other festivals besides the New York Indian Film Festival, is when, and you know, this year, of course, we'll have to do a virtual festival because theaters are still closed in New York because of the pandemic. But before that, until 2019, when we would actually have the actual physical festival, you know, after the audiences have seen the film and they come out or they've had a conversation, you know, there's a Q&A with the director, and to interact with the audience, then you know, them coming and talking to me about what they liked about the film and how they were so thrilled, because the films we program are not available in New York. You know, big Bollywood films, Salman, Shah Rukh, Akshay Kumar films, those get theatrical releases in the US, in New York, and everywhere else. And now, even though OTT platforms are showing a lot of the indie films, but many of the indie films that we program don't even get to the OTT platforms. And so I'm bringing stuff. In any case, I'm bringing stuff which is, you know, brand new, which people have not heard of or not have seen. You know, we talk about Assamese films. I mean, a few years ago, I showed Amis, which I think everybody should watch Amis, which I was stunned by it the first time I watched it. And I watched it, you know, a few times. I showed Reema Das's Bulbul Can Sing, Village Rockstar. I couldn't, but both the films, again, they just blew my mind. And the excitement you feel as a, I'm also using my journalist head. I'm watching a film, but I'm also using my head as a film festival programmer. And I see a film, I'm like, my God, I really have to get this film to New York. I've got to show it to my audience. It is so wonderful. The excitement I feel, that is very important. If it's technically well made, if it's a good narrative story, all of those things are important, you know, in different ways. So there's no one criterion. It has to be a good film, but there are so many good films. You know, you have to find some gems out of the good films also.
Right, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aseem ji, for joining us and writing such a wonderful book on equally wonderful actor. And his name still brings about so many memories to us. And really, I would like to thank you on behalf of Shreya, myself, Trends Platform, and everyone present here today.
No, I really appreciate it. So many people are still listening to me after 1 hour. I thought people would log out and go. But thank you all. Thank you.
It was definitely very, very interesting.
Yeah.
And thank you, Sonal Popli and Bhavita Batra, for putting us through to.
Yes. I'm really honored. And now I'll, of course, come to, you do your sessions on every Friday evening, right? I would love to come for the next, you know, I'd love to attend the other sessions also. So thank you. This is
Next
really.
Friday we have Jyotsna Mohan.
Okay.
Yeah. And then we have Akar Patel on his book, Hindu
Okay.
Rashtra.
Wow.
I'll keep on posting you.
Yes. So thank you all. Thank you for listening. Yeah. And thank you
so much for joining.
Yeah. All righty. Okay. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.